It's funny how like one bad game, it's the sky's falling, and everyone's, oh my god, what they gotta like shake it off. They gotta do something big before the trade deadline. Like, look how far off they
Tell
are.
Noah Hannafin to stay in
Oh
Boston.
yeah,
Don't let him go home.
and then it's like the very next, and I know Vancouver had an off night. Like, I'm sure they'd be the first to tell you that was one of the worst games they played all year. Um, I suspect we'll see a closer contest when the Bruins go out there in a couple weeks. But regardless, like, yeah, just a great response from the Bruins to kind of make a statement. Not just that you can beat the team that's right there with you competing for the best record in the league, but that Tuesday just isn't who you are.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by CLNS Media and sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel and HelloFresh. My name is Evan Marinofsky. Here joining me today, the great Scott McLaughlin. Scott, what is up?
Not much. What's up with you, Evan? Thanks for having me.
Of course, nothing much, nothing major. Are you nervous at all about Monday? Monday's Beanpot final? Are you nervous at all?
A little bit. Northeastern's given BU trouble this year. Both their games have gone to overtime. Northeastern's they've been the dominant team in the Beanpot. So recently, yeah. So BU the favorite, but I don't think that's going to be an easy game at all.
I think I agree with you. BU, to me, on Monday, why they won was they played like the underdog because they were. They just lost 2 to BC. They were technically lower ranked, all that stuff. And they played like the underdogs. Your team did almost blow it at the end. That did almost happen, but
Yeah,
ended up winning. So that counts. But Northeastern, like the Beanpot's their biggest thing. Like that's the Huskies. That's just I always say it's like their national championship. They can win the Beanpot like it's a successful season.
yeah.
So
I will say I know you're there as well, but I will say that Northeastern Harvard game, the first game Monday, that was being played like 4 gears below the BU-BC
oh
game.
yes,
That was a slow, not very exciting game. So I think Northeastern does have another gear, but they're definitely going to have to be better than they were this past Monday.
yeah. It's funny that Northeastern Harvard game ended up kind of having an exciting finish, but I just think it just didn't look great in comparison to what was coming after it,
Yeah.
right? Like on its own, I think it would have been a good game, but it's just like everyone's like, all right, BCBU, come on, let's go. BCBU, we need this. So again, I'm happy that it was first round, but there's still part of me that would have loved to have seen that as the championship game. But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So
My only thing there is I feel like even if it had been set up where BUBC could have met in the championship, I feel like Northeastern would have ruined it for someone. Like they would have
you're
pulled
right.
off the upset. So
Well, my wish of Harvard winning this Beanpot unfortunately did not go very far at all. So unfortunately that didn't take place. I will say though, that's my second time watching Max Celebrini in person this year. I saw him earlier this year play the NTDP. I wasn't at either of the BCBU games earlier in January, and then I saw him Monday. How was there ever any doubt that kid was going to go number one? Because going into the year, it was really between him and Yzerman, and like I think Cole Yzerman's great, but Celebrini, man, that's the total package.
yeah, he does it all. It's like I remember early in the season, he was coming off shoulder surgery, and it was like, okay, it's going to take a little time to get going. He's 17 years old, and playing NCAA, like that's pretty big jump. And it almost right from the like, I was at his very first game at Bentley, and I think there was like a little bit of a feeling out, a little bit of a slow start, and then he like took over the second half of that game, and there was like every shift he was dominant, and then really since then it just hasn't slowed down. Now BC in that weekend series did do, I would say, about as good of a job as anyone could do of bottling him up, and even then, like he still had chances, he just didn't bury them. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's a lot of fun to watch, and I think everything you're looking for in a center. He's not a generational talent like a Bedard or a McDavid, but he's a really good number one overall pick, and I think now pretty clearly the top pick in this draft.
I was gonna say with his size and his game in general, I think he's a really safe pick as a number. I always said this, like I remember last year saying like obviously Bedard's the number one pick, but he is smaller, and there are questions there. Whereas you have a guy like Fantilli or even Leo Carlson, who's a little bit bigger, plays maybe a little more 200-foot game, and it's a little bit more of a safer bet. You kind of know what you're going to get out of him as a number one center. Obviously, Bedard is better and has the higher upside. I get that. But Celebrini falls into that Fantilli category, I feel like, of like a really good, center who you kind of know what you're going to get, a little bit easier to project at the next level. So I think that'll end up happening with him.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? Finish off Celebrini thought. You're the BU guy.
Sure. I was going to say, like, I've been impressed with his willingness to get his nose dirty, too. Like, you kind of wonder that a little bit with young players who have always been the most talented at every level they've been at. Are they going to go to those dirty areas? Are they willing to mix it up, take contact, all that? And I think he has. Like, I don't think he's shied away from that at all this season. So that's been impressive, too.
I agree. Anyways, let's get on to Bruins. People in the YouTube comments, Scott, always get very angry when we spend the first couple minutes not discussing Bruins. So
listen, you can't have me on between the two Beanpot nights, and come on.
That's what I mean. We've got to talk a little bit of Beanpot, and people should care about the Beanpot, even though UMass isn't in it. I think they should still care a little bit what's happening in the Beanpot. But Bruins crushed the Canucks on Thursday night. Great response. I think that was kind of my main takeaway was, they played like garbage against Calgary the other night. Montgomery called it the worst effort he'd seen in his 2 years as head coach here. But to have that kind of response, to go in, to have Vancouver come in and play the way they did, 2 shorthanded goals in the first period. I again, it's hard to have some big long-term takeaway from that. But, that's a hell of a response game, and I think encouraging going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, to an extent, shorthanded goals can be a little bit fluky, although obviously, the Bruins made good plays on both. Charlie Coyle starting them, Marchand finishing, Danton Heinen with a great finish. But even beyond that, that was a great first period for the Bruins. Held Vancouver to 4 shots, and with multiple power plays mixed in there. Like, that was impressive. I thought they played a lot more physical than they did against Calgary. And you just saw the intensity level rise. And I know Montgomery highlighted that after the game too. He said he really wanted to see the intensity, and he did. It's funny how like one bad game, it's the sky's falling, and everyone's, oh my God, what they got to like shake it up. They got to do something big before the trade deadline. Like, look how far off they are.
Tell Noah Hannafin to stay in Boston. Yeah. Don't let him go home.
And then it's like the very next, and I know Vancouver had an off night. Like, I'm sure they'd be the first to tell you that was one of the worst games they played all year. I suspect we'll see a closer contest when the Bruins go out there in a couple weeks. But regardless, just a great response from the Bruins to kind of make a statement. Not just that you can beat, the team that's right there with you competing for the best record in the league, but that Tuesday just isn't who you are. Like, that's, and that you're not going to let games like that compound and snowball. You're going to get right back at it next game and just bring a much better effort.
Yeah, and Montgomery said it after the game when they go to Vancouver in a few weeks. Vancouver, I think it's going to be a much different game. They've been a great team this year, probably maybe the biggest surprise in the NHL, and it's hard to take. Again, you can't be like, oh, that's they caved in the big game, Scott. They're not going to do anything in the playoffs, but I do think there is something to be said about this Vancouver team in that when you have success, the teams that have success in the NHL playoffs typically go through a lot of shit to get there. And I don't know if that team has taken their shit, had the shit come at them, so to speak, at all. And I think they're going to need some seasoning in the playoffs before I project them to have any huge run. But they're a fun team, and they're good. And it's good that, they're better again. Of course, a Boston-Vancouver Stanley Cup final again would be outstanding. But I don't know. What do you think about that team?
So I think they're good. I agree with you, though, that they got to get battle tested. They remind me a little bit of last year's Bruins. Obviously, not at the same pace points wise, but in terms of it just seeming like everything's going right. Bunch of guys having career years.
New bald head coach.
Yeah, exactly. There's people might be familiar with the concept of PDO, which is like, it's basically just your shooting percentage plus your save percentage. And it's meant to more or less measure luck. Although, you can be a more talented shooting team, you can have more talented goaltending, but the Canucks PDO has been like incredibly high all season, which is the sign of like just a ton of their shots are going in. Thatcher Demko's been awesome in goal. And it's like, that's kind of what the Bruins did last year. And then one of those things falls off a little in the playoffs. In the Bruins case, the goaltending. And all of a sudden, you get upset in 7 games and you look around and you go like, what the hell happened? And I could see that happen with Vancouver, where it's like, if either Demko slips up, which, he's been a really good goalie throughout his career, but he's had some down stretches, or if their finishing just like isn't there for a couple games, it could all go south pretty quickly. And I think, being able to fight through that to still win games in other ways is something that ultimately like the Bruins didn't do last year in that Florida series. And I wonder if the Canucks can do that. We'll have to see, but that they certainly are fun and talented. There's no question.
Yeah, they have talent, and I think there is a core there where I don't think this is a one-year thing. But I do, the goaltending is great. But I don't think this is their year. Winnipeg, I think, falls into the same thing. But Winnipeg also has been going at it for a while. I mean, Winnipeg kind of not being great last year, even back in like 2017, 2018, they were one of the better teams in the league. They went on some runs. So I put them in maybe a different category than I do the Canucks, because the Canucks, this does feel very new, anyways, before we get to the rest of the conversation, a quick word from one of our sponsors.
Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today and you get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And we're back. Beautiful. If that was the FanDuel ad read, which you should have heard, Super Bowl coming up. You have any big predictions on that, Scott? Any big Super Bowl predictions you like?
Nothing crazy, but I am going Chiefs. Like it's kind of wild to me that they're the underdogs. I don't know how you bet against Patrick Mahomes. And
I agree.
Not just that, but that defense, Chiefs defense has been filthy. I don't fully understand why the 49ers are the favorites, so I will gladly just take the Chiefs and Mahomes.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to see the Niners win, though. I would, because the Mahomes-Brady stuff starting to really ramp up, and I don't want to hear any more of it, so I'd love to see him lose a Super Bowl, but I agree with you. I don't know why they're underdogs in this game.
Yeah, and as a Patriots fan, I also want the 49ers to win, because I want there to be another way to win a Super Bowl other than you have to have a Hall of Fame all-time great quarterback. So, it would just be an encouraging sign to see the 49ers win with Brock Purdy, who's good, not great, and you can just build a good team around him. And, that you can still do it that way, I think would give not just Patriots, but a lot of fan bases hope.
I agree with that. There was a tweet yesterday from Ty Anderson that I found interesting. I agree. Complete boo. I saw Dom Tiano tweet something, a clip of, or a screenshot of Connor and Ty talking. It's like, who wouldn't want to listen to these two? And I'm like, me? I wouldn't want to listen to Ty Anderson talk ever about anything. So that's just me. I'd love to listen to Connor, though. We have obviously Connor is on a lot and has his own podcast here. But Ty, boo. I kid. I don't hate Ty. Ty's fine. Anyways, he tweeted something about Danton Heinen signing him long term, and I think a lot of people are like, "Wait, what? Seriously? What are you talking about?" But I do think that there is some interest there in an idea, and I'm saying I'm interested in this. I'm not saying Heinen is necessarily interested in this, but a long-term deal at a cheap price. You know what you're getting from Heinen. He's a reliable guy, and I do think it's an interesting discussion to have of What if you did get him at a 4 or 5 year deal at an AAV of like, 2-3 million? I don't know. I think that's an interesting topic.
So I'm generally not a fan of locking up.
I'm not either, by the way.
Bottom six forwards on any sort of deal that would qualify as long term. Unless it's like a young guy who's clearly part of your future, and there's like Trent Frederick, got to be fine with.
Yes, agreed.
He spot on this team, no matter what. He's just getting to his prime. With Heinen, I would be open to like two years, maybe. Maybe 3. I don't think I'd go too much beyond that, just because as much as I like him and as good as he's been this season, there will be another Danton Heinen at some point, and locking yourself into a play like that, like into his 30s, it starts to get a little sticky for me. But
I mean, the Islanders have been doing this, and it really hasn't been working.
Yeah, but 2 years, if you were open to that, like, great, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. 2 years is fine. I don't have the Ty tweet in front of me. I don't know if he mentioned 4 or 5 years. That was kind of what I assumed he meant. But I agree. 2 years, sure. But once I agree with you. Once you start getting into that 4-year range, guys, bottom 6 guys like that are rarely going to go up, especially someone at Heinen's age, and we kind of know what his game is. It's either going to stay the same or it's going to peter off a little bit, and that production isn't going to be there and things like that. And that's when that money starts to stink. So I agree. I don't want him super long-term locked up. But again, if it can be shorter term, I'm okay with that. Before we get to the big news, which is Matt Poitras, another quick word from our sponsor over at HelloFresh. Quick break in the action to tell you about our delicious friends over at HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. A crazy schedule can make it easy to fall back into your dinner time recipe rut. But keep mealtime exciting with over 40 recipes to choose from every week. There's always something delicious to discover with HelloFresh. Turn to HelloFresh Market for yummy add-ons and enjoy the season's limited time fall flavors lineup. It's that time of year, right? Things get you in the mood, like apple cider cake with caramel sauce. All the ingredients come fresh, from the crushed tomatoes to the Italian chicken sausage mix to the Parmesan cheese. It's delicious, and I feel like a chef when I'm doing it. What's better than that? And this is a busy time of year for me with hockey starting up. I don't always have a ton of time, so this recipe makes it quick to enjoy something amazing. So join in on the fun. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Now, back to the show. So Matt Poitras, the big news, obviously announced out for the rest of the season, needed shoulder surgery. He's been out for a little bit, so some question marks around him. 2 questions. 1, is this going to hurt his development? And number 2, did the Bruins did the Bruins make the wrong move? Were we all caught up in the hype a little bit too much at the beginning of the season? I don't think we were. I think he has all the promise in the world. I think he earned the right to be here. I think injuries happen, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was a mistake. Like you said, he earned it. I mean, he was clearly one of their best 12 forwards in the preseason, and even through that 9-game sample, extended tryout, whatever you want to call it, before they had to decide to activate his entry-level contract. And, for a while after that, he continued to produce at a pretty good clip. Like, I think it pretty quickly became clear, like, okay, he's probably not going to be a top 6 forward this year. He's, you're not going to start giving him like 18 minutes a game. That wasn't realistic. But solid third liner, I thought, was absolutely in play for him. And he produced like that for a while. I think at the time he got hurt, he was 5th or 6th on the team in 5-on-5 points per 60 minutes. And that was even with that production dropping off in January when he came back from World Juniors and then suffered the injury, battled through it, was in and out of the lineup a little bit. So No, I think you saw a lot of good things from Matt Poitras this year, and I think he was going to need some sort of reset at some point. But I still had some optimism that if he was healthy, he could get back to producing like a really solid third liner. And that would have been a big addition for the Bruins down the stretch, or big contributors. So no, I don't think they made a mistake. And as for his development, look, obviously you never want any season ended, cut short, and it would have been great for him to get experience down the stretch and maybe even playoffs, depending on how he would have been playing at the time. But it would have hurt his development even more had they kind of strung this out and tried to play through it, manage it, workload. But ultimately, it's still probably going to need surgery in the off season, because then that ruins your entire off season, and you're looking at like a November, December start to next season. Brad Marchand just talked about this early this week. He had the double hip surgery last year, obviously completely different injury, but he said, when you come back in November and you haven't had training camp and a summer of training, he's like, you just can't play catch up mid-season. Like, you're just not going to get to the level that other guys are at. And especially for, he'll be 20 years old next season, Poitras. That's really tough. Like, he needs that physical development that you can really only do over the summer. It's so hard in season to get stronger, to build up your conditioning. Like, that's really off-season stuff. And so for Poitras, this coming off-season is going to be huge going into next season, which will hopefully be year 2 in the NHL. Obviously the hope is that he makes the team out of camp again next year. So I think you make the right decision getting the surgery now, setting him up for success next season instead of trying to fight through this, potentially making it worse, and kind of only delaying the inevitable.
So you're telling me Patrice Bergeron can't play catch up in the middle of the year and come back and be the hero that everybody wants him to be? Is that what you're saying, Scott?
I don't. I mean, look, I don't put anything past Bergeron, but I don't think that's happening, Evan.
No, not a chance. You're right on Poitras with the development in taking the rest of the season. But I will say, and again, obviously he's injured, so it's different. But I would have loved to have seen him in the playoffs. I think that was my big thing. Was I just wanted to see where he fit in this lineup, how he contributed, how he responded to postseason hockey at 19 years old. Again, it goes out the window when you need shoulder surgery. So I get that, but I just would have loved to have seen it. So yeah, unfortunate news with him. And I'm curious, I mean, does that change what you think the Bruins should do at the deadline at all? And where are you at in terms of what you think the Bruins should do at the deadline?
Well, I'm going to kind of take a cop-out answer a little bit. It might change it. I think the Bruins have to figure out what they have internally and how comfortable they feel about the center position. And by that I mean, do they think Jesper Boqvist can be their fourth-line center the rest of the year into the playoffs? If they have questions about that, do they think Johnny Beecher is going to be ready to come back up and contribute and be, what he showed flashes of early in the season as a potentially solid fourth-line center? Do they think, a Georgi Merkulov has a chance to contribute? Like, is he any kind of option? So they have to figure out if they're comfortable with their internal options, especially at center, especially solidifying that fourth line. I think the third line right now they have Lauko on it. I'm not sure that really lasts all season, but you can easily just move Danton Heinen up. Like, that's if you have a Heinen, Geeky, Frederick third line, that's really solid to me. So whether it's a third line guy or a fourth line guy, I think they got to find something, whether it's internally solidifying what they already have, because, like right now, Oscar Steen's been in the lineup more often than not. I don't know if he's, I don't know if you really want him playing every night come the playoffs. They just called up Anthony Richard. It sounds like he's going to play Saturday. Like, we'll see how that goes. Is he an option? So there's definitely some questions there, and there's some openings for someone to either run with a job and claim it for themselves, or for them to go outside and make a trade and say, whether it's a center, a fourth line wing, whatever it might be, like, we need to solidify this group with X.
And I also think that that does change things a little bit, because going into the deadline, again, we're about a month away. There was talk of, they could go for Adam Henrique, or they should potentially go for, Noah Hannafin was brought up, but that's like the biggest fish out there. You're gonna have to give up a lot to get Noah Hannafin, but Bruins should go out and get, a potential top 4 defenseman and things like that. That's gonna cost you. I don't think they have the assets to go out and get a middle, like a Henrique, and then also, depth on the back end. I think the move might be get depth guys at both areas, guys who, not high upside, third pairing defenseman, and, a potential fourth line center. Like, I think that might be more what they are in the market to do, because I think we're in agreement. I'm not trying to give up, a ton, unless it's for someone with control long term and you're bettering your team and all that for the future. But I don't think they have the pieces to go out and get like a Henrique and someone that could be a potential top 4 defenseman. I think you almost just have to kind of go, either you have to pick one or the other, or you go with depth in both areas that aren't high-end players. And I think that, to me, is more the thing there, where you want to have depth, because I don't know if it's worth going out and getting those higher-end guys.
Right. Or if it's a situation where you're going to sign a guy to an extension, if it's someone kind of like in their prime years. Like,
yep.
There was a report that it sounds like there was a team in on Elias Lindholm that only wanted to give up a first-round pick if they could sign him to an extension. And Elliot Friedman has hinted that team was the Bruins. Like, that makes sense to me. I don't think the Bruins are in a position. Last year, they traded away 2 first-round picks for rentals. Yeah. I don't think they can do that again. So
no.
if you're giving up a first-round pick, another first-round pick, like, it's got to be someone with team control. So, if you can get Noah Hannafin and sign the hometown boy to an extension, like, okay, that becomes a little more doable potentially when it comes to giving up great, real high-end assets. But for a rental, yeah, I agree with you. That'd be tough. I've thrown out, and I think you've maybe even mentioned this on another podcast, like Jake Middleton in Minnesota would make a lot of sense to me. He has another year of control after this. That's if he's available. Minnesota might sit there and say, like, no, he's part of our team next year. We expect to be, contending playoff team again next year. They're not going to trade him. So, like, there's only, first you got to find the guys who are available. Like, it's easy for us to sit here and say, oh yeah, Jake Middleton would be great. Give up a second, a fourth, and a mid-tier prospect or whatever. But it's like, okay, but what if the Wild just aren't even remotely interested in trading them? Then
and what if there are other teams driving the price?
Right.
Up, you know? So I agree with you. And that's why I think this deadline's tough to predict. It's annoying for the Bruins and for teams who want centers, because the top 2 centers are just off the board now. So we'll see what happens. A lot more where that's going to come from in the next couple weeks, especially with the deadline. Scott, what can the people look forward to from you over at Odyssey and the Skate Podcast?
Yeah, just more regular coverage on WEEI.com, Skate Podcast, as you mentioned, and Sunday Skate returns a week from Sunday, February 18th. Me, Andrew Raycroft, Bridget Prue, whole gang back together. So,
and that's
it'll be
9 a.m.
Sundays at 9 a.m. Yep.
There you go. So not too early on a Sunday morning, after the Saturday night games, you'll be up. And I remember in the 2019, during the 2019 playoff run, you guys were doing Sunday skates like overnight. Like that was like the night show at times. Like it was crazy.
So I wasn't doing it like regularly back then, but yeah, I remember there was certainly at least like an 8 a.m. starts and maybe even like a 7 a.m. mixed in. That was. Yeah, that's not fun after a late Saturday night.
I could be I think after the Bruins scrimmage to open the 2019 cup, because they had that long break in between. Yeah. I want to say Ken Layard and Matt Kalman did one at 12 a.m. But I could be misremembering. But they did one at night after a game, and it was crazy. I think they did one because I remember like listening on my ride home. But anyways, hopefully you don't have to do any of those. Hopefully there's none of that.
No, I don't. I don't think that's in my contract. I gotta, gotta check the fine print. But
exactly. But anyways, Scott, always a pleasure. And that's it. That's this week's Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.